I'm Elle Embers, and this is Cosmic Curiosities. Mortals. Welcome to this week's episode of Cosmic Curiosities. Today is our first official Halloween episode, and I am so excited. We are diving into the spooky Scorpio season and welcoming back our first guest and my fellow Scorpio Rising sister, Kelsey. As I'm sure you all remember, Kelsey is a Hellenistic astrologer, and today she's giving us the full rundown on eclipses and what to expect in astrology over the next couple of months. As Halloween is my favorite time of year, we have also added a little spooky fun to this episode. So, with that being said, will you pick trick or treat? Kelsey, welcome back.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back.
Yes, I love having you. But in case everyone has forgotten, do you want to give a quick intro about who you are and what you do?
Of course. So my name's Kelsey. Thanks for having me back. I practice Hellenistic astrology. I do readings privately. Lately, I've been doing workshops, which is so exciting. I love sharing this gift and passion of mine with everyone. It's a gift that we can all learn, which is why I love it so much. And I love the replicability of it. So It's great in tandem with my job and mental health, where I really like to focus on the science behind things and getting into the astronomy and metaphysics, as well as the philosophy of astrology is my jam.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Definitely my people.
Yeah, we just chatted for an hour before we had lots to catch up on.
We do tend to check in on each other with how we're going with our similar astrology placements.
Oh, yes. Elle and I are both Scorpio risings. And if you didn't know, the South Node is in Scorpio right now. And we're about to have a partial solar eclipse in Scorpio on the 25th. When we release this episode, this eclipse will have just occurred. So I hope everyone is feeling refreshed after this lunation. You know, we'll get into it more in detail, but this eclipse that just occurred is kind of like a new beginning based on an ending. And for you and I, it has a lot to do with who we are and how we present ourselves and, you know, a lot of depth in the Scorpio topics and archetypes, which are, I think, really tied to desires and motives. We are ruled by Mars in traditional astrology. So I would say it's been like a resolve to come connect with you and message you and see how you're doing and, you know, mirror back the stories of how we're both experiencing this transit of the South Node moving through our sign. Yeah.
Spooky similarities, especially for Halloween times of year.
Oh, yes, which is why I thought this would be perfect when you asked me to do another episode, because it is definitely a spooky Scorpio eclipse Halloween season. It's Halloween tomorrow. So we will be celebrating that as well as the Scorpio eclipse, which is very similar in my opinion. It's a little scary for some people to learn about eclipses because there's a lot of information out there. So I think that's what intrigued me about the topic too, when you asked me to do eclipses and this particular time in astrology. So I really like to break down, you know, how astrology can help us and not be this feared oracle of fate and karma and the gods and, you know, or, you know, voodoo, which I hear a lot from people. But I do like to check in with my Scorpio rising friends just to see, you know, how are we experiencing this new beginning and what are we having to let go of in order to embark upon this new beginning?
So I guess talking about eclipses, can you explain to us a little bit about what eclipses mean and generally what that means for us in society?
Yeah, so eclipses are, I think, really widely interpreted in modern astrology as indicators of fate, just like they are in some traditional interpretations. But there are some key differences that I found really intriguing when I learned traditional astrology in more recent years. So eclipses are given this really substantial emphasis in ancient astrology because of their association with the moon. So because of their association with the moon, we would look at an eclipse as some sort of indicator of a fated outcome or an external event outside of our control or our free will. So they're a lot like wave sets. Like my boyfriend's a surfer, so I was thinking about this as my teacher Adam Ellenboss of Nightlight Astrology often refers to eclipses as wave sets because it's not like the event will happen on that day for everyone. So it's not like every person has one eclipse event on the 25th of October and lunar eclipse in Taurus is on the 8th. That wouldn't be like a grand event for everyone on that same day. It's more of a chapter opening or a chapter closing. And then the waves that carry on through that 6-month cycle are like the effects of that new beginning. And oftentimes eclipses aren't even of our own will, they're external events. And in order to understand them, we kind of have to understand the more basic concept of the luminaries in the zodiac, which are the sun and the moon. Because looking at the astronomy of an eclipse, the astronomical configuration is actually a symbolic representation for what ancient astrologers would interpret. So we have in a solar eclipse, the sun and then the moon and then the earth. So the moon is between and obstructing the light. And from Earth, we can see this more darker image. And it's said that the sun represented the ideal image in ancient astrology. And the moon represented the more fluctuating aspects of the material realm that we live in as human beings. So if the moon is obstructing the sun's light, it's kind of like spooky Scorpio eclipse. Like the light, the truth, the reality is a little bit obstructed or altered in some way. So that's kind of why the astronomy of eclipses created this very symbolic interpretation that has a lot to do with fate and scares many people. And that's where I got the name Scorpio spooky season because, I just think it makes so much sense, especially this year, because we have a lot of other Scorpio placements that make this new moon a little bit more emphasized. And I should say as well, a solar eclipse is going to be a new moon, but emphasized or amplified in some way. And then a lunar eclipse, which I'll talk about next, will be like a full moon. So again, like what I was saying about the eclipses and understanding the actual archetypes associated with the sun and the moon, it can help us understand what eclipse might bring to us in our birth charts or collectively. So what I love about astrology in Hellenistic traditions is that there's so much replicability and seeing the astronomy and metaphysical concepts line up with the philosophy. It feels nice. It feels like I can safely deliver this information to my clients and help them understand it in the context of this material world, which we do have free will. So it's not like the fated outcomes of events will take over and take that away from us. Eclipses are kind of like the only element in astrology I would say are really like associated with fate and destiny more so than anything else, or our karma.
Yeah. So with the difference of lunar and solar eclipses, do they bring different energy? Is it similar to stating the new moon and a full moon? Different energy occurs when we reach those points. Is it the same with eclipses?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say that the eclipses create this emphasis of it's time for this new beginning, or it's time for this to end. And I think I talked about this in our first episode, but I often think about fate and free will in the context of like stopping a bad habit, like if we have a habit that we want to stop and we've only been doing that habit for a year, it might be easier to stop that habit than, if it's been going on a long time, maybe 10 years, 20 years. So I see eclipse cycles, which are technically 18 years. The nodes will return to their exact same position, but they'll reverse and go into the opposite position they're in 9 years. So technically I kind of see chapters of my life in that way now, and I'm sure I really will as I get older and actually experience more of these chapters, because they do kind of connect with, what do I want to let go of in this season of life, and what am I stepping into? And how is this environment and the circumstances around me that are fluctuating, that I can't control, that have to do with society and resources and relationships I have outside of myself? How are those things playing in? Because eclipses have a lot to do with our response to circumstances. So I've been saying to you, I've been laying low because there's a Scorpio eclipse. So I'm like, I just want to be really close to my integrity. I want this to be an epic new chapter for me. And I wish the absolute same for you, because I can tell both of us are on a really awesome journey, finding a path, doing healing work in different ways, and finding our confidence doing those things, even if they are different. So that has a lot to do with this particular eclipse. In terms of the differences between energies in a lunar eclipse, I would say that would be a full moon that culminates, and it's kind of like a fated ending or a fated culmination point. Sometimes a full moon doesn't bring an ending. It brings a celebration or a culmination point, a peak, where we can see the growth of something over the last 6 months. I can even think of right now, I have a friend who's pregnant, and by the next eclipse, she'll have her baby. And it's like the beginning of this is like clearing out, what do I need to clear out for that new beginning to occur next spring for her? So, for all of us, we can figure out without astrology what topics this has to do with in our lives. I know that all of us feel it, because when I see clients at my day job and talk to friends, I can hear in everyone's voices they're ready for this new beginning, and they want a stable, secure new beginning with the nodes in Scorpio and Taurus. So there are different energies brought with a solar eclipse and lunar eclipse. So it's just something we can take into account between them, that there's this season of change occurring and unfolding. There is a general precaution to not start anything huge during this time, because you kind of want to see the results in terms of what's possible in this reality. As I mentioned, the light is obstructed during an eclipse, so we don't quite know how something will play out yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we need the light to make that informed decision.
Yeah.
You've mentioned north and south nodes there. For people that don't know what that is or how that relates, can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. So in traditional astrology, we see the 7 traditional planets as super prominent in the birth chart and the transits. We also have 3 outer planets that were discovered shortly after in the grand scheme of time. So we don't necessarily include those in the birth chart readings at first, but more so to contextualize the transits and understand maybe placements in the birth chart more deeply. And then we also have nodes of the moon. So these points in a birth chart in the transiting sky really are not physical entities, but more so points. And they are essentially moving intersection points between the sun and the moon. So it's like the midway point between the sun and the moon on both sides. They're said to be kind of like I don't know, like tipping points between the reality of the sun, the ideal image of the sun and the sun's light, and then what's possible, the fortune, the fluctuating what ifs and possibilities of the moon. And in modern astrology, the nodes were understood a little differently than they were back when we did ancient Hellenistic astrology. So now that I'm learning more about what ancient astrologers thought of the nodes, I'm conceptualizing a lot differently in my readings and in my own practice. Modern astrology sees the nodes as indicators of fate, but there's an emphasis on the north node as what we're supposed to be doing. And then the south node is kind of like our past lives. And it's not to say that's not part of the story, but in traditional astrology and lots of mythological stories that are included in Vedic astrology, as well as medieval astrology, tell the story of Rahu and Ketu. Have you ever heard of this before, Elle?
No.
Okay, so in Indian astrology, Rahu is the north node and Ketu is the south node. And, I'm going to butcher, and that is definitely a pun for the story, but I'm going to butcher the story. But basically, I think this dragon was a demon and he wanted to be immortal. So he drank the nectar of the gods without permission. And then he was punished by being chopped in half, butchered. And so the north node was his head, south node was the tail. And it's said to be this marker of fate because it was said that he is immortal, but he has this double body. And there's parts of him that remember maybe what he went through and why that wasn't necessarily the best for him. And then parts of him that must go on as this new self. So that story can play into the modern interpretation. But in the ancient tradition, it was seen kind of like we might head towards the north node and where it's placed in our chart based on the house topic. But the south node is also a very spiritual element of how we get there. And it's often said that both were considered malefic or bad in ancient astrology. So it wasn't a very positive thing because if you think about it, even us asking when we get a reading, what's my purpose? What am I here to do? It's you're here to just have the reading. You're here to just be you. And there's no big thing. There are several big things and a sense of purposefulness that we seek constantly, but it's not necessarily just the north node in your chart. But what we should remember about the south node is it's not all bad. There's this spiritual element that we can relax back into. So it was said that the north node symbolizes increase and momentum forward and movement forward. And then the south node represented decrease and diminishment and dissolving and breaking down. And it was said to increase both the good and the bad wherever it was. The south node decreases the good and the bad. So that's why it's a little different. And why I was actually kind of stoked to have the south node go through my first house because it's not all bad, right? It's kind of great. I'm wow, I have discovered a whole new part of myself that is part of me I always knew that I was, but maybe I needed to do some more spiritual work the other way, which was in relationships. And I learned the spiritual lessons of self through relationships and the karma that I experienced in relationships. So that was my experience so far. We'll see what else. We haven't had, by the time this is released, we'll have had the Scorpio eclipse, but there's more to be revealed.
Exactly. And like you mentioned in our first episode, that it's not so much about when a transit or a stationing or retrograde or anything, when it starts or when it finishes, but it's also kind of the journey through.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, I would say when you move through an eclipse, having knowledge of where this is happening, you can kind of practice a ritual of some kind by just maintaining awareness of where this new beginning is happening. So checking the house of Scorpio in your natal chart would be helpful. And also checking Taurus, because that's where the total lunar eclipse will be on November 8th. And the spiritual ritual practice you could do would be just making an offering of some kind, like whatever it is, whatever topics come up for you and whatever comes to mind, that's the right thing. So that you're not doing something completely in your own free will, and in your own will, you're still choosing to have however you define a higher power, the universe, whatever you relate to. You're kind of offering it up to that source and saying, I'm participating in whatever new beginning is here for me. And this is me showing that I am ready for that. So for me, it's been like saying yes to more things that I truly want to do, but feel really tough, but also just like silly things. Like I would like to get my eyebrows done, and I'd like to do more things that are like, I'm ready for this new beginning. I'm going to like just do one small thing for myself, but I'm not going to like go get a full tattooed sleeve.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make a small offering. But even for me, it's been, I think we talked about this a lot before we started recording, but we were both relating on the fact that we haven't been putting as much effort into like getting ready. And that has also been a part of my offering, is like being like okay with the South Node decreasing the things that are bad in my first house, which is maybe me being a little too concerned about my skin that breaks out sometimes. Who cares? I certainly don't lately. So it's been a really spiritually uplifting journey. Catharsis is a great word for how I feel lately. Just like, so many emotions, but like at the bottom of it is just me. And it's like, I feel good there.
Yeah, totally. And for me, it was kind of the opposite. Like, rather than saying yes to things, but learning that, no is a complete answer. I don't have to validate why I'm not doing something, and just taking that into consideration as well, and respecting my own boundaries, and to stop trying to please other people, but to focus more on pleasing myself.
Yes. And that's a perfect example of how different astrology can play out in two different people's lives with the same sign.
Yeah.
And we're talking about rising signs. So even that, it's more specific, but yet our stories are still very different. So it's really interesting. They're also very the same too, which is so cool.
Yeah. It's just how they play out that is different. But generally the intention or the purpose or the meaning behind it is often the same, but it just shows up differently in our stories.
Yeah, I would say because it involves the luminaries, the sun and the moon, in a very rare astronomical alignment, it's like this important, emphasized turning point in many of our lives based on the topics. And then the differences in solar and lunar would be whether there's an increase or a decrease. Also looking to whether there's a new cycle beginning or ending. And I often like balance the two. Like, just because it's a solar eclipse doesn't mean there's not something that needs to end there, because, for instance, right now, the South Node is with that solar eclipse. So the words total and partial, that's also something you might see when looking into eclipses. But this will be a partial solar eclipse because that has to do with how close the sun and the moon are to the nodes. Yeah. So, for instance, this solar eclipse on the 25th was at 2 degrees and the nodes are at 13, if I'm correct. I think so. And then a total eclipse would be, something that's very close in degree, and the light would be very obstructed. So, yeah, like I said, I tend to see them also as like two sides of the same thing. So it's like you're more so dealing with two houses than one when there's an eclipse.
Yeah.
And this past eclipse on the 25th was also conjunct Venus. So each eclipse is going to have a different flavor, if you will, or a different, persona. And it's definitely something that plays into the topics that will show up in your life for the 6 months to follow. For all of us, something helpful would be to look at the houses that are also ruled by Taurus and Libra, as Venus is conjunct this eclipse. So we know that Venus is going to bring in those topics that she rules into this eclipse. For you and I, it's spirituality, our private life, things that undermine us, things that prevent us from becoming who we are. Yeah. And then relationships, like outdated cycles in relationships, things that we don't have time to deal with because we're focused on our self-development, and also making stronger connections with people who do want the authentic version of who we are.
Yeah.
And, this goes for everyone as well, because Scorpio and Taurus are a lot about security and feeling safe. So a lot of us are feeling these eclipses come up, whether it was last spring when we had eclipses or this season, about love and money. So those are big topics this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can eclipse energy really play into our charts? Like if someone, say, is born on an eclipse or, has their birthday around an eclipse, things like that, how does that impact the energy in our charts?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because it is actually one of the first things I look at more recently using Hellenistic techniques. I will look at the eclipses that happened closest to the birthday, if not around it. And this was something that ancient astrologers paid a lot of attention to with looking into a chart, and the karmic imprint that is kind of promised by the chart was just the eclipses and syzygies, which is a really cool word that I just learned how to say recently. But yeah, eclipses and syzygies, which means lunation cycles or moon cycles, they really can show a lot about the fortune. So this can show a lot about what will happen outside of that person's control, I would say. It's not like, don't go cry if you're born on an eclipse, but it's technically, if you look up stuff on Google, you'll see like, oh, it's not the best to be born on an eclipse. Traditionally, it was said that you will probably have to deal with stuff in life, but who doesn't? It's part of life. Yeah. So get a reading with me if that's true. I'll help you out with it. I was born very close to an eclipse. I was telling Elle before the episode. I was born about 4 days after a solar eclipse in Capricorn. So that just shows, like, as an example, if I was reading my own chart, I would say like, oh, okay, a solar eclipse right before someone was born. That shows that in that person's life, they're going to play out the topics of that house and that sign in a very fated way. It's something that they're maybe destined to do, or maybe there'll be topics with communication that come up. So for me, it was in the 3rd house. So that would be my Capricorn house. I definitely am a workaholic. I am constantly studying, reading, writing, typing, talking. I talk pretty fast.
I feel you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's something that's just part of my life. And, we'll see what I get up to, because I am only 29, but I will probably do more teaching of astrology, a lot more forecasting and 3rd house stuff. Maybe I'll write a book, who knows what I'll get up to, but that could be a signification of an eclipse in the 3rd. And I am now at a place where I just simply have to be myself. And that's, I think, part of my solar eclipse in my birth chart. So if you have a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse in your birth chart, or you were born close to one, you just have to look at that house topic and think about, what is coming to be in this life in the realm of fortune. And certain things, make sense down the line more so than now. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. So what can we expect with astrology and the energy collectively as we move out of Scorpio season and head towards 2023?
Sure. So today would be the 30th. So it's actually a really important day in astrology today. And that is the beginning of Mars retrograde through Gemini. And this is pretty significant because Mars doesn't technically spend this much time in a sign very often. It's not normal. It's a little abnormal. Normally, Mars will take about 6-ish weeks to transit through a sign. And Mars first moved into Gemini August 20th. So it's already been a while. And when I first was looking into this transit, I've only been doing astrology for like 10-ish years and maybe like more intensively for 5. So I have not really seen something like this before. So it was really intriguing to me. And it's happening in our 8th house. So, oh my goodness. Anyway, if you're a Scorpio rising, go ahead and book a reading with me after you listen to this. Anyway, so Mars retrograde is something that I think can teach us a lot about our motives and why we do the things we do. And it's especially interesting because it's coming right after we just had this Scorpio solar eclipse. And Scorpio is ruled by Mars. And yesterday, the 29th, Mercury moved into Scorpio. Bear with me. I know it's hard to hang on with all the details. So what happens next is Mars stations retrograde in Mercury's sign while we just had a eclipse in Mars's sign. So there's that mutual reception. These planets are up to something. There's like a connection there. And, this doesn't happen too often either. And especially with such a long transit of Mars through Gemini, this will last until March, I believe. So we will be, getting comfortable with rethinking, reprioritizing, and really taking stock of our motives and what we're working towards. And the retrograde begins today until I think it's January 12th. I believe. So it'll be a long retrograde. And it's kind of like my astrology mentor said this. His name's Adam Ellenboss. He said that it would kind of feel like a very long, intense Mercury retrograde because it's Mars in, I know. I'm a little, I'm intrigued is a good word. But yeah, it'll be like Mercury because Mars is in Mercury's sign, and Gemini is very strategic as well as Scorpio. Gemini is inventive. It's a mutable sign, so it's a sign that changes the seasons, so it's very inventive and it can move with things. But we're having a Mars retrograde within this sign, so we're rethinking and slowing down a bit right now about what we're working towards. That is one thing I'm really focused on, especially because that's happening and starting now. Typically, Mars retrogrades can bring a reversal of actions, a reversal of your intentions or motives. You could maybe have more of an internal reflection, especially Gemini rising people. Definitely feeling the shift of speed towards a change, just creating some sort of pause. Like all of us might feel right now like we were headed towards something since August, and right now we're kind of like, I think I need to figure out what just happened through the Scorpio eclipse and what I need to let go of. And then once January comes, there'll be this momentum forward. We have Jupiter moving back into Aries after taking a dip back into Pisces. That also began a couple of days ago. So lots of changes happening right now where we're kind of slowing down. And like I said earlier, I'm like laying low recently, just kind of staying in my house, studying astrology with my cats. Just trying to see what is the new beginning bringing for us in terms of our desires and motives behind our desires. That would be a good tagline is, what do we desire and what are we willing to do for our desires? And I should also say Mars is stationing retrograde in a square with Neptune. And this can indicate feeling like we're moving forward up until now with little clarity. And so now we're going back to see okay, well, what was that about?
Yeah.
How can I figure out like, and maybe like clearing things up that you were brushing it under the rug. Like, it's fine, because Scorpio season comes and some things are not fine. And sometimes we need to talk about it. So it can be like a feisty time coming up, but we have Halloween, so that'll be fun. We can kind of get into character there. And then, there'll be lots of strategic moves, but they'll be slow. So not to like fearmonger or be scary or anything, but I think we should all like check up on our passwords and make sure that we have changed all of our passwords, that everything is locked with a password, because there could be like hacking stuff. I've seen, different symbolic arrows towards that direction. And I was just watching a lecture by my teacher, and he mentioned like a past transit where we were having new inventions of the internet during this time. And now I think there will be more strategy into like privacy. And I think we can see this a lot with like censorship and people telling people what to do with their bodies and, different things like that. So I think there's a lot of people rethinking what really is the most valuable thing for us to do right now. And that involves rethinking our personal motives and what we're pushing forward towards. And sometimes that means we've arrived somewhere and we're like, okay, well, now what? Let's set a new goal. So maybe the retrograde is realizing that the journey is where the awakening comes, like getting to the destination. It's that cheesy line. Like, if we keep setting new, bigger goals for ourselves and hustling and Jupiter and Ariesing and just being very individual and I wouldn't say domineering, but there's a lot of domineering energy lately because Jupiter in Aries has brought out a side of us that really wants something new and doesn't want to put up with, a lot of the censorship stuff that we've been experiencing or the silencing. And, I think collectively, at least in the United States, I think there'll be lots of stuff coming up around eclipse season. So maybe already now or especially next year. But, in our individual lives, this has a lot to do with checking ourselves on our motives before we really commit hard to something that we know will be associated with who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had to have a little like internal giggle when you mentioned the passwords, because in Australia just recently we had this huge telecommunication hack that,
oh my gosh,
yeah,
no
that a
way.
whole telecommunication company was just like hacked into, and people's private information, details, all that, passwords was all leaked.
Wow. I had no idea.
It was a big
I'm
thing.
sorry.
It was a big thing. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I've had some strange stories too. And it's just like, especially because we're Scorpio. So in general, it's more of the archetype, which is about our secrets and our desires and, our most intimate side, our sexualities. I think that's why a lot of these topics are coming up with like security and making sure that we all feel safe. Like even working in mental health, like I've seen a huge shift. I've worked in mental health for several years, and I've seen a huge shift lately with talking about safety and trauma, and I don't feel safe and I'm saying my boundaries. And that's very Taurus, Scorpio, like getting to the bottom and excavating through trauma. That's very Scorpio, dissecting through and getting to the bottom of the deep meaning of our stories. Very Scorpio. And then we've got Taurus, which is about feeling safe and secure. And that's been a big topic for a lot of us. So I think that's what we're focusing on through this eclipse season, especially coming up to on the lunar eclipse in Taurus on the 8th. And then I think there's like, it's like we're captured by something, like we feel drawn to doing something. And then the revision that needs to be made first is this Mars retrograde. We also have something really interesting happening when Mars enters Cancer in March. We also have 2 huge transits happening. So I wanted to mention those as well. because Saturn just recently turned direct after being retrograde since June. Saturn turned direct on the 23rd. So this really moves Saturn into its final phase, and it'll move into Pisces by March. So as Saturn moves direct, it's a big time for us that this is the last time from now until March where Saturn will be in its home sign. Because before it was in Aquarius, it was in Capricorn. And that was also a Saturn-ruled sign in traditional astrology. So since 2019, we've been kind of like going through some hardship collectively. And there's been this like slowing of time. Yeah, I mean, ring any bells? Like, it's so interesting how astrology lined up with the pandemic. And, you know, Aquarius is a sign that's, I think, really widely misunderstood. So I want to talk a little bit about that sign because at the same time, well, not at the same time, like 20 days after, give or take, Pluto enters Aquarius. So Saturn moves out of Aquarius and Pluto moves in. So, whoa, that's going to be crazy. I mean, I'm intrigued. Again, only word for it.
Pluto only moves like every, like 20, like generationally, doesn't it?
Yeah, like I believe once it enters Aquarius, it will dip back and forth between Cap and Aquarius for a little longer because of retrogrades, but it will then stay in Aquarius until like 2042. That's a long time. So a lot of people that I learned astrology from haven't even experienced Pluto leaving a sign since they started doing astrology. So it was really interesting to learn what my teacher had to say and just thinking about the archetypes in my own experience because Aquarius rules my 4th house, which we often associate with the home and family, but it's also like the past and the deep roots of like who you are and like the patterns that we have. So same for you. This is a really big moment for family and for like our soul tribe and like feeling at home in this life.
That's crazy because my eldest son, he's an Aquarius, sun, moon, and rising.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I have to look at his chart sometime.
So I'm like, holy shit, Pluto is going to be a trip for him.
Yeah. Yeah, we can definitely look into that. But, don't be afraid if you have any Aquarius placements. I've got Saturn and Venus there. So this is going to be a big one for me too. But it's like, there's a point, I don't know if it's just Saturn return, but I just feel like I was born for my life now. Like I was like born to endure this life. So I can do this, whatever it means for you and I, we will grow a great deal in the next 6 months because of this transit. Saturn's finishing out its very powerful 5 years, or no, I guess it was 3-4 years in a Saturn ruled sign. So Saturn has been like seriously whipping everyone into shape, helping us in ways that don't feel helpful, but have been maybe structural or constructive in helping us develop a more clear picture of our ideals. And this is because I think it's important to understand what is the sign of Aquarius really mean. A lot of people just think it's a water sign because of the baby pouring water or the God pouring water. And it's an air sign. So it's a sign that I think it's misunderstood because in modern astrology, we associate it with Uranus for some reason. It does align and it feels very nice to have everything align, 12 signs, 12 planets. But in traditional astrology, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn in the Thema Mundi, the birth chart of the cosmos. And this meant that Aquarius had Saturnian themes. And in order to understand a sign, we understand it through its relationship to the luminaries. Everything in astrology has to do with astronomy, which is so cool. I actually love it. It's something that helped me understand Aquarius a lot more, is looking at it through this lens. Because I thought, well, Aquarius isn't very Saturnian. It's not like a responsible sign. Like usually the stereotypes are like, oh, they don't give a fuck, or they, they do their own thing or whatever, or they're emotionless. I hear a lot and have definitely said before. But yeah, so it's important to understand like, well, where does that come from? So if we think of the thema mundi or even just a chart, the sign of Aquarius is opposite the sign of the sun, which is Leo. So if we think about like, how does Saturn see the sun, looking at those two signs and their rulers facing off, opposing each other? Well, Saturn is the slowest of the 7 traditional planets. It's on the outermost ring, so it's furthest away. So technically, it's kind of like the watcher between worlds. So it's like in between the material world looking into the personal planets, Mars, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, and also seeing the outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. So Saturn has a relationship with the sun that's very objective because it's sitting just right across the way, just looking straight at the sun, just seeing the sun. So very literally, the way the Aquarian archetype sees the sun is objective. It's difficult for the sun to see Saturn because it's so bright, but Saturn sees the sun as the ideal, objective, unchanging image without any emotion. It just is what it is type of thing. So understanding that archetype helps us understand Aquarius, because it's like, when you're setting a goal, and the sun can be like a representation of that goal. So if the Saturn placement is looking into the sun and seeing it objectively, sometimes it's that feeling of like, cool, a goal. It's not that special. It's just a goal, or like, it just is what it is type of thing. So Saturn can sometimes see our goals or our ideals and our dreams and ambitions, our sun topics, as just like, yeah, but why are you so intrigued by the ego? Or just seeing things from a detached perspective of like, it's not that important. So that's where that archetype comes from, of Aquarians being like the devil's advocate or not caring about people's emotions. It's more so that they're more focused on the spiritual element of being that in-between planet that can see both far beyond the personal, the material ego of the outer planets and the universe at large, and also connected to the traditional planets and the personal planets and the material realm and Earth. So if we think of also the image of the water bearer, it's as if the water is like the emotion or like the goal or the dreaminess of achievement, or it can even be something that we hold that is captivating us. And Aquarius is pouring it out and being like, I'm fine without all of that. I'm just going to have what it is.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like when you get upset and you're just needing to vent to a friend, and then at the end you just feel better. That's like you're the Aquarian water bearer. You are becoming more Aquarian, more spiritual, more connected to the divine in between space between the material and the realm of karma, taking that cup and just offering it and giving it away, and then realizing that you just come back to yourself and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
In a way, it's like, it's kind of like the most spiritual sign, which like really upset me for some reason. Because I like technically on, past events and comments I've made, I have not been a big fan of certain Aquarians, not the archetype, but even my own placements. Like, it's my most malefic planet is Saturn in Aquarius. So it's a planet I struggle with, and it's a sign I struggle to understand until like recently when I was reading about some of the ancient archetypal myths behind this and what that water bearer means. Because I always thought, like, why is he holding water? Like, what is the point of this?
Yeah. Especially if it's air. You're like, it's an air sign. This makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, it's like he's holding that which we feel is so important that we're like captivated by it. And he's just like, nah, like it's not that important. Like, just pour it out. And that's why next March, we will feel this quite heavily when Saturn finishes up preparing us, and then Pluto moves in and helps us fully immerse ourselves and place a lot of profound emphasis on whatever transformation is happening in that house placement. So it's going to be more personal for each of us in a different way. But you can check the house ruled by Aquarius in your chart just to see where this is going to show up for you. I think, for most of us, it will be something that we are used to, as we just had Saturn move through this place, which is also technically like spooky, malefic planet kind of. So it's not like there'll be, crazy surprises for every single person on the 23rd of March next year. But I think it'll be a couple months of Pluto and Aquarius will show us, wow, I have really transformed this area of my life and I'm ready for more.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Do you have any ideas of how this will show up for you in your home and family house? Have you thought about moving or anything?
Oh gosh, we have always thought about moving, but I guess responsibilities that we feel that we need to uphold to work as a family has a lot to do with why we are where we are. And I feel like, yeah, there has been moments where that has kind of changed perspective a little bit, but I'm not too sure, but we'll see.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, I mean, I personally, I'm not planning to move either, but I have that same transit coming, and it will be a very long transit, and Pluto will be moving in and out for a couple of years. So it'll be something I think we are going back and forth with. But it could also just have to do with, like I said, the fourth house also represents our patterns, and I associated a lot, shout out to Daniel right now. He's a Taurus and he does past life regressions as well. And I know he's your friend as well. And I think it's cool that you have the North Node in Taurus and you just started doing quantum healing, past life regression as well. And it's interesting because the Taurus archetype, all of the eclipses that are moving us forward in this way, it's kind of like offering us a deeper security. And I know that for Daniel, we were looking at eclipses for him and he was doing something with his work and it had to do with the fourth house. So for you, a lot of this Saturnian energy in Aquarius and then Pluto moving through Aquarius, that might be a lot about your work in the depths of the quantum field and having a lot of transformation there and helping other people transform as well.
Yeah, totally. It makes sense. But also, I'm sure Daniel is just vibing right now that he's had so many mentions throughout episodes. Because literally had his episode and then Leanne's episode, he's also mentioned. And now,
oh my gosh, I should.
He's just like,
I'm enabling.
Full heightened.
Yeah, I think it's his South Node in the 10th and North Node in the 4th. Sorry for just completely volunteering that out, Daniel. It's okay. He won't mind.
He'll be like, I'm getting a mention. It's fine. No, he's a good egg.
Oh yes.
But yeah, I've stopped finding it weird that him and I have so many similarities in things, whether it's astrology, whether it's past lives, whether it's purpose related or soul related. It's just like, yeah, fuck, dude. Something happened there in some incarnation and we just have this ongoing vibe now. I
know, and he connected me with you. So thanks, Daniel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where would we be without him?
He is loving this.
Oh, so much. So much. But yeah, I do see moving into more of past lives because I am venturing more into different techniques, different aspects. So yeah, that totally makes sense.
Nice. Yeah, and it could also have to do with just milestones in your family. You have kids that are in their teens, right? Yeah,
my eldest is turning 13 in February.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that would make sense.
Yep. He is the Aquarius in the family, the sun, moon, and rising.
Well, get this. My niece has everything except for her rising and her moon in Aquarius.
Wow.
I'm excited to get to know her. She's
That's
only
a
1.5.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah.
It's the cutest age. That's a lot of energy. It's a lot of. I have a lot of Scorpio in my chart, like a lot. And I always thought, like, oh yeah, that explains a fair bit.
Yeah. I know. It's funny because I have the most placements in, like, if I were to look which house has the most energy pointing towards it. Because I'm born at night, the most positive planet would be Venus, and I have Venus in Aquarius. And also because I'm born at night, the most challenging planet would be Saturn, and it's also right next to Venus in Aquarius. So, so yeah, that's a big emphasis, but not much in my persona as it is in my life. Like, I'm very connected to my family. I like decorating my home. I mean, you can see behind me. I know we're on a podcast, but I like to have eccentric decorations. So, because it's ruling the 4th, but also just an energy that I feel pops up a lot because it's like in the 4th, it's like a pattern or like a subterranean energetic magnet that I just feel drawn towards Aquarian people, maybe because I wish I was more free and I desire that with my Venus in Aquarius. My Saturn kind of wants me to empty that cup of water and not carry it as much. And especially now with Saturn return and Pluto moving into Aquarius next year, I'm sure I will definitely find more of these really deep spiritual reckonings with myself. It's just been such a depth of self-discovery this year.
Yeah.
And it's been cool to do readings as well because I'm helping others use astrology in ways that have helped me really awaken the spiritual side of myself and reconnect it with my love for science and reasoning and symbolism and mythology. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the Aquarian energy shift next March. I'm looking forward to it because I think society needs it too. Like, we just went through a long transit of Saturn in very powerful strength in its home sign, and then moving into a Jupiter ruled sign of Pisces. That will be different. That will be different. So we'll have to do another episode then.
Yes, definitely. I love it. And the spooky vibes of eclipses are always a fun topic. But before we wrap things up, I do want to dive into Halloween a little bit because it is my favorite time of year. I was married on Halloween.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Yes, it's so exciting.
How many years?
It is our 3rd wedding anniversary.
Oh, so working on communication this year, I see. It's your 3rd perfection year.
Yes, definitely. Oh, look, we have had such an amazing life together, but also communication, it's the biggest part of any relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to see what happens because we have embodied better communication with each other throughout those years, but I'm interested to see how this embodies itself now.
Yeah.
But as for Halloween and being spooky and creepy, what is the spookiest Halloween story you have ever heard or seen or experienced? Give us something scary to think about.
All right. Let me see what I can freak you out with. So the spookiest Halloween story I've experienced or heard. Well, I've definitely had some spooky Halloweens just with like personal life realizations during Scorpio season because it is lighting up our first house. So I feel like Halloween's always really spooky for me, like internally, because I'm like coming out of my shell and like becoming a new Scorpion, I guess. But the way I wanted to go with this is I wanted to talk about a movie that I saw recently that I think really represents the Scorpio eclipse we just had on the 25th. Yeah, it's something that honestly, it was like terrifying and disgusting. Like I was suffering through the movie, but it was so good and I would like to see it again. I think they're doing a sequel. It's a film called X. So it is, X rated or R rated or whatever. I don't know if it's X rated, but it is about desire and how horrific it can become, which can be quite scary if you think about it. And as I go through the South Node in the first house transit this year, I've been thinking about, what are my desires? What am I letting go of? And all of that. And I saw this movie like last month with my boyfriend, and, we were horrified together. Like, oh God, it was this group of filmmakers. They're going to this like abandoned area, or this maybe not abandoned, but this farm where they were going to record and film an X-rated film. So they're going to make a movie, and these old people live on the property. And the old woman is just like really thirsty for the young woman that comes to the farm. Like, she becomes obsessed with the young woman, and she wants to embody her beauty, like her desire and lust for the young woman's beauty that she once had but lost comes up so great for her that she commits atrocious acts. I mean, let me say, you can watch the film if you want. I'm not going to describe it, but I was taken aback by the acting, because I found out that the actress that plays the old woman and the young woman is the same actress. So I feel so bad because I'm forgetting what her name is, but it's Mia Goth. She's in it. But anyway, amazing. I was stunned that was her and her. But anyway, the film really shows some of the archetypes of the Scorpio eclipse conjunct Venus, because it shows, yes, we want money, we want beauty, we want love, we want immortality. The nodes of the moon kind of reminded me of this too. Like, she wanted the immortality, but there's impermanence of life. All things come to be and pass away. All things age and expire. And, we have to be okay with living and experiencing that decline, and maybe ridding the definition we've constructed of decline. Like, what does aging really mean? We often think about like the positive things we say is, oh, we get wiser. And I mean, thank God, because I mean, I'm really looking forward to growing older, and I'm weirdly looking forward to the feeling of looking at a young woman and being like, wow, like, she has no idea how beautiful she is, what she's got, and how she should really value herself more. And I know that I'm going to think about myself and be like, why was I so hard on myself? Why did I have body image issues? Why did I care about so-and-so? And for some reason, this horror film brought that out in me. It brought this up for me. I was like thinking about desires and, the aging process. And I guess as a woman, I just think about that a lot. Like, I've heard in the media a lot like, oh, like this stupid celebrity's dating this stupid celebrity and there's an age gap and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, how are we ever supposed to feel okay about who we are at what age if we're always shamed of what we look like at any age? Like, it's like, we're going to age. Like, at one point, I know I haven't yet, but I know at one point I'm going to be like, should I get Botox? And that's going to be a sad day, because I don't really want to do that. But, maybe my mind will get so sucked into our society that maybe I will at some point. And, it's the desire that I'm talking about. I don't think I ever would, because I'm so afraid of needles, but never say never. But it just got me thinking a lot about it, because Scorpio and Taurus are really emphasized this year in collective astrology with the nodes. That has a lot to do with beauty and what we will do for beauty, and the self-sabotage that goes into it. And this film was absolutely just disturbing. But if you'd like to be freaked out and disturbed this Halloween, definitely check it out.
Yeah, it's funny how like some movies, although they have set this intention, like whether it is to scare you or whether it is to make you feel some sort of emotion, but what it actually brings up in different people is so interesting. Like the fact that that did bring up those desires and thoughts in you, that's like that interests me so much.
Yeah, and especially like after the movie, turning to my boyfriend and telling him all that, he was like, yeah, I didn't get that same thing, but it was good.
He's like, I was just horrified that
yeah,
that
he was
took
like,
place.
it's like, it made me really uncomfortable. It was really gross watching that old woman. And it wasn't gross because she was old, by the way. I want to clarify that. It was gross because of like what was happening. So you can definitely check it out for yourself.
I figured as much. But yeah, I mean, I totally get that. And I even do that now. Like I even look at younger girls than me and go, they have no idea. They have no idea what they have. Like
I know. I literally look at myself in the mirror every day and I'm just like, can you appreciate what you have? And can you just look at yourself in the mirror and see the truth, see the sun, see the beauty, see the light? Like, you know, and lately it's been really nice. The answer has been, yeah, I think I can. And the South Node eclipse is helping with that. And also Saturn and Aquarius, we're all going through that emptying process where we're just like, you know what? I'm willing to offer something up if it means I can have something that will resonate better with me. And we're kind of like willing to take the chances right now.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for sharing all your amazing astrology wisdom. If people are wanting to grab a reading with you and find out more about what their chart has to offer or what the eclipse and transits are doing for them in their chart, where can they find you?
Sure. You can find me on Instagram at MetaNovaGirl, and you can also find me on my website, which is astrologyrx.com. I have private readings. You can choose between an hour or 30 minutes if you want just a quick follow-up or quick question. Although, you know, I could talk for hours about one chart, so go for the 60. And I do actually have a workshop coming up if you're local. I know a lot of people will be listening to this in Australia, but if you're local in Los Angeles, I'm doing a workshop in Santa Clarita. Head to my Instagram, MetaNovaGirl, to get information on that. And it's in November on the 12th.
Amazing. That's so exciting. I'm so excited that you're doing workshops now. I love it. I'm here for it.
Oh, thank you. I know. I wish I could invite you, but maybe sometime I'll do one over Zoom. I've been thinking about doing that because I do have, so gratefully, I can say I have like friends in other countries from doing astrology and, you know, meeting you and some other people through Daniel and just different spiritual practitioners that I've met through doing this work. It's like opened my eyes up to the fact that, oh yeah, like this is totally where I'm supposed to be right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I do have to do a frozen yogurt trip over to Daniel in LA. So I'm sure one of those times you'll have a workshop and,
yes,
and I'll get to come.
That would be so lovely.
Yay. Amazing. All right, lovely. Well, thank you so much for today. And
of course.
Hope to have you back.
Oh, I hope so too. We'll definitely do one next year and see what's up in the stars.
Well, this is your Earth Side Spirit Guide signing off for the week. If you'd like to know more about how you can work with me, you can follow me on Instagram at l.embers or visit my website lembers.com.